Good afternoon. Welcome back to another rendition of the B&H virtual event space. You are tuned in to portrait gear, cameras, and lenses and bears. Oh my. Cameras, lenses, and more.
That was so bad, Derek.
I've been overdue for a dad joke all here, Chris. And I
Yes.
saw your smiling face up there, and I'm like,
Yeah, we
got
gotta
him
do
on his
it.
own. Look, I already got like the nice pink background here. We were talking earlier. You got me in like the good juju's rolling. So
Yes.
huge thank you, obviously, to Chris for joining us and Sony for hosting this wonderful event. If you guys have not seen Chris's portrait work, it's some of the best. I love it. Love having Chris on. It's always a good vibe. So, Chris, what's going on, man? It's
Yeah,
been fun.
this is so great, Derek, on so many levels, but one, gear. I mean, gear is this tough, complicated topic, right? Because it's dicey, because it's expensive, because there's all these reviews, because everyone has an opinion. And sometimes, like, how do we cut through the clutter? So that's what I'm hoping to do today, and to take a different approach to portrait gear, and to make this relevant to you, whether or not you shoot with the same brand that I shoot with. So I'm going to talk to what I use, of course, but the hope is that it's relevant to all of us, and that it adds some value to thinking through how do we use gear to capture great portraits. So that's
I
that's
love
a
it.
jam for today.
Awesome. Well, I'm hyped. I'm going to turn it over to you, but I will remind everybody, if you do have any questions at all, not only will Chris answer them, he would love to answer them.
Yes.
So
And sometimes I answer them, and I take too much time answering them. No, but yes, let's dialogue through this, and maybe I'll pause, a little bit through. But yeah, let me jump in, share my screen, and then we'll see if we can do this. And then Derek, just give me the maybe the A-OK if we're seeing what everything good.
okay, we're good.
All right. So huge thanks to Sony. I'm a Sony ambassador. I love everything about the Sony community and family. I'm so grateful to be part of it. I'm focusing on portrait gear, as I mentioned, but what I want to do is make this relevant for all of us. As an artisan, there's so many different people from so many different walks of life that capture images and create films in so many different ways. So really honored to be part of that mix. I'm also an author. I've written 7 books, most recent ones about portraiture. The one before that was on creativity, and then other topics as well. So want to just jump in and show a few images. I was in Costa Rica maybe a couple weeks ago now, and this was an image I captured there. These are also a couple images that I captured there. So I'm a working photographer. This last week, I've been on a 4-day job shooting and filming for Ghirardelli Chocolate. Before that, it was Costa Rica. I love the craft, the art of photography. So if you want to connect, there's my Instagram, there's my website. It's always just my name. And want to rifle through a few other photos so you get a sense of the kind of portraits that I like to create. Sometimes, actually a lot of times, I like to work up really close. I like to have that sense of connection. I like to have the eyes communicate a lot. I like there to be a sense of stillness, of calm, of authenticity, of warmth. I shoot outdoors like those photos. I also shoot in the studio. Sometimes I'm working on set. And in other cases, maybe I'm photographing a family or kids or an actress or a friend or a shoe designer or a bride. And so that's a little bit of some of the stuff that I do. And with this presentation or this talk or this conversation, maybe that's the best way to say it. I want to look at, Sony kind of cameras and lenses, but also, as I said before, I want to do this in a way that's relevant to all portrait photographers. And so you'll see that as it comes up. So just know when I call out specifics that you can translate this to your own language, but I want to kind of give you a sense on what am I using. So my kit currently consists of 2 A7R5s and 1 A1. And this is my go-to kit when I was shooting for Ghirardelli last week, which was great because they sent me home with a huge bag of chocolate. If you don't know Ghirardelli Chocolate, it's a great, fun chocolate company. And when I was in Costa Rica, the same kit. And then the lenses that I'm using are their G Master lines of lenses. And this is what I'm using the majority of the time. In general terms, when you're looking for a lens, you obviously want something that's really sharp. You want something with beautiful out of focus area or bokeh. And then you want something that has a really good build so that it just functions well and it's reliable and all those things. The G Master lenses, in my opinion, really do that. So I kind of want to go through the ones I use most often: 35, a 50, a 24 to 70, 85, and 70 to 200. Now I'm going to be showing example images, of course, and talk about nuances and all this stuff. But really, like if we had to kind of have a snapshot of my bag, there's batteries and cards and other things like that. But as far as cameras and lenses, this is it. This is kind of my go-to range. If we focus in on one, say like the 85 for a moment, and combine that, this is just from Sony's website, but they kind of call this the ultimate portrait prime, which I would agree. It's a 1.4 portrait lens. It's just absolutely amazing. 90% of my favorite images have been captured with this lens. And so we're not going to get into those details, but just kind of calling out that if you want to dig deeper into that side of the lenses, there's a lot of good content out there and reviews. But this one's a little different. This one's a little bit, my review or my conversation today is more about the feeling. And so when you look at an image, say like this, you have to ask yourself, well, do you like it or not? Okay. And then if so, why or why not? And for me, I like the feeling, the calm, the connectedness, even the closeness. You feel this really close connection with the subject. Here's the 85 used at a little bit of a further distance back. Again, I like the look, I like the feel. It's not overly compressed. It's also not too wide. This is the same person photographed 2 different days, but you get the vibe. One's on the street, one's out by this river near where I live. Here's a couple other examples of working up close, looking away from the camera, looking at the camera with some lens flare. This is natural kind of a door light. So there's just an open door and they're standing in front of a backdrop. And I love that I can create really deep, soulful, authentic connections with this quickly. And one of the reasons why I think you can do that with the 85 is you have a pretty close working distance. I also have other lenses like you saw on that list before, say 70 to 200 or 135. With those lenses, you're a little bit further away and it's hard to have a conversation, but you can tell I've been talking to the person. I'm kind of working them to the right moment, and then they're taking a breath. I often ask my subjects, take a breath, and then there's that connection. So the 85 for me really does that. Just to highlight a different one, the 24 to 70, and again, we're just kind of dipping our toe into this topic of lenses and of look. So there's more coming, but hopefully you're kind of starting to see, okay, these are some of the things that we might be thinking about. The 24 to 70, in particular, the most recent version of that, it's called the G Master 2 or the GM2. This is the most useful lens I own. So this is, in a really good way, the workhorse. Or if this were a vehicle, it's like an off-road 4x4 truck. Like I can go anywhere, do anything, accomplish anything that I need to do. It's compact and lightweight, amazing resolution, bokeh. It's the quality at all focal lengths is unbelievable, and it rivals the primes. So it's the first lens, because I love primes. Who doesn't love primes? But it's the first lens that isn't a prime, which has that kind of quality. This is a 2.8 lens, and it's one which its use, like I've never been in a situation where I couldn't use this lens. So in this case, photographing a friend who's a yoga teacher in this, I don't know, this is like a 150-year-old adobe structure, is kind of neat. Or on the left, this was a commercial job, photographing this painter. And then on the right, another commercial job, more of an up close portrait. So it gives you this ability to shoot in so many different ways and to capture so many different looks and feelings. And because of that, I love this lens. It is a very dreamy lens. So when I say workhorse, I don't want you to think that it's less than, or it's just like, oh, this is, I don't know, maybe this is just standard. It's not standard. This is special. This lens is a truly magical lens. I was shooting stills and filming a music video for this band. And again, that lens for stills and for videos works incredibly well. And the reason why I wanted to bring up filming is I do a lot of filming as well. And also I include in that video portraits. So it's kind of a still moment, kind of moving into someone. And I'll use that lens often. You can work at a really close distance with this one as well. So this is an engagement photo. And She's very proud of her ring, so it's more of a ring moment kind of smile. And this is that same person actually on her wedding day, and in this case in Yosemite. So we have all these lenses, and these lenses give us this ability to express in so many different ways. One way we might think of the range of lenses, also I should say, are there wider lenses? Are there more telephoto lenses? Yes. But just for the sake of conversation, I'm narrowing it down to these 5 pieces because these are the ones I'm using most frequently. Back to what I was going to say before, which is the range. It's almost like having a keyboard, like a piano keyboard, all 88 keys, right? So when you have this range, you can really go a lot of different places and express things in a lot of different ways. When you limit yourself to maybe 1 or 2 lenses, you're confining your creativity, and that can also be a way to become really creative. To say, okay, I can't do everything right now. I just have to really focus in on it. And so part of the decision when it comes to lenses is really thinking through how we want to use them and how they allow us to express in different ways. So one of the things we think about is their focal length, and then of course the f-stop. And let me just jump into that. The focal length gives us the ability to have different angles of view. So if you're watching this right now, or you're at home somewhere, if you hold your hands out in front of you and your hands are maybe about 6 inches apart, that's the angle of view you get with a 70 to 200 at 200 millimeters. It's a very small slice of the world. So if you were to hold your hands, both hands in front of you, right? I guess I can't really do it on camera, and then move around, you're seeing this little teeny slice. So the red in this graphic, that's like 70 to 200. And then maybe the 35 is the green and the 50 is that blue. And what that means is if we're at a scene, and this isn't a portrait, but maybe a portrait of a bird, and we have that 70 to 200, the angle of view is going to be this small slice of what's happening. If we change to 35, we're going to get a larger view. So my friend Matt and I were out shooting in Idaho this last year, and he loves doing bird photography. It's fun to learn from him. He's an amazing photographer, human person. And Matt K, if you Google him, you can find his tutorials and all kinds of great stuff. But anyway, if he's photographing this bird, he is first thinking kind of his angle of view, like what do I really want to get? And also in bird photography, it allows you to get close to objects that are far away. So you're thinking your working distance. How far away do I want to be from a subject? Now, I have a 100 to 400. I never use that for portraits because it just means I'm too far away from people. But in this case, he has this nice angle of view, and then he has to say, what f-stop do I choose on my camera? If he chooses f2.8, the bird or the person or whatever we're photographing is sharp. The background is blurred. If he chooses f16, well, then maybe the bird and the background are both in focus. So f-stop really allows or affords us this ability to zero in on something in a unique way. And because of that, it's kind of common that in portraits we'll shoot with a shallower depth of field like f2.8, so the subject's in focus and nothing else is. In a landscape, we'll shoot at f16, so the foreground's in focus, and so are the mountains. And Ansel Adams and his crew, they were part of this group called f64, which was like, let's just make everything in the frame in focus. Now, this is an oversimplification. It's not a rule, but it's something that we tend to do. And the reason we do that is if I shoot this image, this portrait at f16, we see the dumpster in the background. But when I go down to f2.8, it kind of fades away. When I go to f1.4, it's completely gone. And this, it's like the same thing, right? It's the same light, same person. I'm just changing my f-stop. And so these afford us the ability to express in different ways. Now, it isn't that one is better or worse. And it's not that you want to capture a portrait in front of a dumpster. Sometimes the things behind the subject you want to include in the frame. And also I should point out that the depth of field, it isn't just controlled by the f-stop. It's your focal length, your sensor size, and your distance to the subject. We can talk more about that a little bit later. But just know there are other qualities here. But when it comes to lenses and lens choice, choosing a lens, for me, I'll never buy a lens that doesn't shoot at least at f2.8 or more. And the reason is because I love that kind of look or that capability to go there if I need to. So to exaggerate for a moment, I think in the way that we tend to see the world is if I were to see my wife, or I'll go back to my wedding day, if I were to see her, my bride, walking down the aisle, I would see her at F1. I saw her at F1.0. What that means is things we really love or we're really interested in, we actually see it in incredibly shallow depth of field. We focus on that person and the rest of the world blurs. In contrast, next week I'm going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and that's what this little graphics from the Grand Tetons there. If I'm there in that environment, I'm going to see it at F64 because it's a sense of awe. It's a sense of everything. It's a sense of wonder. It's a sense of just everything. Everything's in focus versus my bride walking down the aisle. And all I'm seeing is that one singular thing. So the singularity of a shallow depth of field can be really interesting. It's how our eyes, I think, see when it comes to affection and care and respect and reverence and so many other emotions. So in these images, if I know it's the screen small, but if we were to look really closely, we would see their eyes are sharp, but their ears are out of focus. And I love that. I love the fact that the ears are, because ears are kind of weird when you really think about it, but the ears in the background, all those things, they just drift away. So we're really connected to their eyes. And we can see this here. This one's F28, and I'm close. And because of that closeness, the eyes are sharp and the ears are out. This one is F56. So it's not that we always shoot at F28, because I'm in Joshua Tree and we're camping, and this is my friend's son. And I want to see all those Joshua trees and the mountains and the sky and all that stuff. So, and I also want that little sunburst coming off the shoulder. So I can't get that sunburst at F14, and I can't see all the trees. Other situations, let's say just, this isn't the best photograph I've ever taken, but I shot it at F8. I'm in Italy and this looked beautiful. And so I wanted everything. I just wanted to kind of take it all in. So that the comparison, I think, in these really shallow images, for me, they have the ability to have a feeling which is unique, to really connect and express in a beautiful way. And so as we look at these through that, or through the lens of shallowness, you start to see like, oh, now I know why in Chris's up close portraits, I feel this way, or now I know why I'm so focused on his eyes. Like I led a 3-day workshop this weekend and everyone said, I love how the eyes in your photographs. And it's like, well, yeah, I really pay attention to eyes, to light, to catch light, to reflections in the eyes, but I'm also shooting really shallow. I had, Derek, you'll find this funny, but I had someone critique me once. They're like, Chris, all you do is shoot at 85 and 1.4. And I'm like, well, yeah, that is a lot of what I do. And if that's a critique, I'm okay with that, because that's what I love. And these are strangers I just had met, and I love creating those moments in that way. And this is kind of, I think, how I see and how I feel. So we got to find focal lengths and f-stops that match what we want to create, who we are, and how we really see the world. And some people see the world, in a different way. And here's just a zoomed in version so we can kind of see the quality of that. The F14, it's like the edge of his eyebrows aren't even sharp. It's not just his ears, but it's really that. And then the focusing, this goes back to when you're buying these lenses, you want one a camera body that can focus really, really well. And for me, those camera bodies, it's crazy. I'm right now, this is almost, it feels like hyperbole, but 10 out of 10 images are sharp. I don't have a problem ever not missing focus with the eye tracking and all of that, and the speed of the autofocus of the lens and the camera and the stabilization, all those things. So, but also there are times where I'm photographing a painter and I want to see his studio, because I think that's just kind of cool and weird and interesting. Maybe I don't want to see the background, like, I'm not going to shoot this at f16. You can tell it's a little bit blurred, but it's part of the story. Or again, the background, I kind of am liking that. It's not quite so shallow. Or in this case, I don't know why, but I just liked, I had this indigo cloth behind the subject. I liked that. And I liked the feeling of almost like everything, and her hair not fading out and the background not dissolving away. It was a different kind of presence. So again, it's not that you always do this. So I'm kind of, showing that. Also, some of you are thinking, what focal length is this? We'll come back to that. Right now, we're zeroing in on f-stop. Derek, maybe right now I should pause And I could even stop sharing if it's relevant. We don't have to. But I'm just curious if anything's coming up for you, or maybe if there are any questions. Should I do the old stop share
Yeah,
and
we could
jump
do.
on?
Yeah, we could jump a little break
Okay,
here. We
let's do
actually
it.
do have a question from
Okay.
Beatrice joining us. Says, "Beautiful work. How do you manage your white balance setting to achieve the mood you're going for?"
Yeah, that's a great question. And it will be maybe a disappointing answer. I use auto white balance 99% of the time, and especially the new Sony cameras. And I'm not trying to make this a Sony ad, and it's sincere, but they have this new auto white balance sensor and feature that is just so spot on. So, but if I didn't have auto white balance, I think, let's say, I would choose something that was close. If I was in, you can choose like the white balance setting, and then also in post, getting good at finding what the weird color is in the picture. So here's what I mean by that, because usually our cameras white balance, like, wouldn't you agree, Derek? Like most cameras, like I could close my eyes, you could tape over the brand, I could just pick it up and shoot it. It's going to be pretty close.
So,
But what's that?
totally.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the technology is so good now. But if I'm shooting someone, or I should let me rephrase. I don't like that we're saying it that way. If I'm photographing with someone and thinking of this one thing, I was photographing a family friend with her dog, and she was laying down with her dog. This beautiful picture, just kind of like they're hugging and they're on the grass. All the green grass is like reflecting back into them. So the weird color there is green. Or maybe I'm photographing a bride, or this last weekend, a ballerina, and she had a white skirt on. White, whether it's a bride's dress, ballerina skirt, or snow, you'll see in the shadows a lot of blue, because shadows have a cooler color temperature. And when that cooler color temperature is surrounded by white, you see the blue more than if it's like, let's say, the blue shadow is on a yellow fence. You're not noticing as much. So really, like, the blue is a problem. So the point that I'm getting at is not just your white balance, but asking yourself, what's the problem color here? Is the skin tone too orange? Is the shadow too green? Is the white shirt too blue? And learning how to selectively correct that. And what you'll notice in my images is they all look really kind of clean and professional almost. And I don't say that arrogantly, but what I've done is I've removed a lot of colors. Like I could jump back through a lot of slides, and it's not that I just desaturated, because that looks dead and lifeless. It's not just monochromatic, but it's like I'm thinking about what color isn't helping me out here. Does that make sense?
Local adjustments.
Boom. That's what it
This
is.
blue, this blue is distracting, and the overall theme of this image is warm earth tones.
Yes.
There's a very cool blue that cuts in the corner here and is over here, and I need to remove it, or at least mute it so that your eye doesn't get drawn there.
Yeah. Or like this weekend, in my workshop, we had this one model. She's this painter, and she was dressed kind of boho, sweater, jeans with holes in them, leather boots, kind of cool. And so she was this cool neutral tone vibe, but she had bright pink nails. And I was like, Tara, what's up with your nails? She said, oh, I got my nails done. And I just said, do whatever color you want. And it's how funny. And I have these bright pink nails. And so that really just kills all the pictures for me, to have like an even color palette and then just this. But that's, yeah, selective adjustment. I just need to remove a little color, darken it a little bit, and make it red, more like the B&H logo red. You know what I mean? That's like, it's not bright hot pink like your background. It's more of a little earthy tone red. I'm golden. So I think, and this is a long answer, but I think whoever asked that, you're right. You're on the right track. Yeah. Think about white balance, think about situation, but then even more so in post, really explore and ask yourself, what color is working? What isn't? And that can make a big difference.
Totally. Colors drives a lot of mood and it's really interesting. The more you look into color theory about how it controls specifically mood, and you can go back to the personality charts and, oh, red, what does red say to you? What is pink? I just did it when I put this pink on right here. I'm like, what's a really like disarming, just vibey, cool, I want to be here color? And I'm like, pink. Pink
Yeah.
is just, that's it.
Yeah, and it works with your mic. You have these bright colors, and you know what I mean. So you're like creating a mood where, let's say, in my little cabin here, you know, if I probably had a pink light on my face or something, or my backdrop, it wouldn't maybe work as well because I kind of have these earth tones and natural wood, and so finding that, and really, you know, their colors, like you said, you know, getting to explore what color palettes we like or don't like, and then really thinking through. I think skin tone's a big one there, because digital cameras always have had a tough time with skin tones, because it's the red channel typically where a lot of the information is captured there, and that channel is most sensitive to light, and so it can also be the weirdest. You know, early digital capture, people were so orange and strange. It's gotten a lot better, but sometimes what I'll do in my portraits, if I want, because orange is also a color that sort of travels forward, and I don't. Sometimes you don't want their skin to be like coming at you. And so a lot of times I'll remove some of that, and it just sort of brings that back, and then it helps us connect to their eyes. It's not like there's something competing with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Right. Well, should I keep going, or any other
Yeah,
questions
yeah,
there?
go for it. Nothing,
Okay.
nothing for now.
Okay, let's do it. Sharing the screen, jumping back. This is illustrating this idea. This is a bride and groom. We'll see some more photos of them, but I want all of Yosemite Valley to be in focus as much as I can. It's hazy and stuff, so that's blocking some things. But I'm shooting this one at f20, and then when I walk over to them and I want kind of the sunburst kiss, just thought it would be fun. I'm shooting this at f22, and so that sunburst effect is highly defined and determined by that f-stop. But then here, you know, after the kiss, now it's f2.8, and so it has a different mood and feeling and vibe. And so the trick with f-stop, I think, is not to get in a rut that there's one f-stop which is right for all people, all times, all places, because sometimes you can buy a lens that shoots at f1.4. Like, I wish, I don't know if I can't really go back to it. Let me see if I can go back to it. But let me just jump back to this one image. I've talked about this image before, but I actually shot this image really shallow at f1.4, I think, first. I don't have it in my slide deck, but I couldn't see enough of the mountains in the background. So I needed to change that because I want the mountains in the background. So I guess the point of what I'm saying is, just because you bought the lens and just because it has the capability, it does not mean that that should be your forever go-to with that lens. But for me, it's nice to have that if and when I need it. So if my lens was only f4 and that was as low as I could go, that would be really limiting to me as a creative, and especially in the space of portraiture. My friend like Matt, who's a wildlife and landscape photographer, he's a little more open to those lenses. For me, I just can't handle them. So kind of summing it up, you know, less tend to want to have less in focus with people. With landscapes, we tend to want to have more, exaggerating here. But the f-stop is something to think about when it comes to that. Next, I want to look at some examples for our focal lengths. And just going to jump through to start to get a feel for the angle of view and the narrative capabilities. So this is a 24. And so at 24, we're able to, this actually is a 24 to 70 at 24, I should say. So I'm able to show a lot of the environment. And for environmental portraits, going down to a wider focal length allows us to have that type of a look. And again, a look without distortion. It's nice and clean, but it's allowing us to kind of set the scene. In cinematography, you often need more of these pulled back scene centers, that then you scene setting photos or compositions, and then you move up close. I do the same thing in portraiture. I'll capture this, and then I'll also capture things that are up close. This focal length does work moving in close as well. You have to be careful how close you are for distortion, and often you want the subject closer to the center of the frame when you're shooting like that. But it just really allows you to tell a wider story and capture environmental portraits. Now I'm moving to the 50. This is shot in a way that's very shallow. I'm guessing this is 1.4. And this is, again, for that band. And the other guys in the band do not like being photographed. The lead singer here, Glenn, This is a band called Toad the Wet Sprocket. They were big in the 90s, but he was okay with it. And so it was kind of fun. And they actually love this, and they love that 50 look. 50 gives a really natural, authentic kind of a feel. I think if it were an instrument, I think the 50 is like an acoustic guitar, and you feel like you're present, you're there, and you're connected, and there's no crazy bent lines, there's no distortion. It's just like good, natural, fun vibes. This is such a fun photo. This is Avocado Farmer, his wife, and their kid, except look at the kid. He just does not look very happy. I think he just woke up from a nap or something, but I still love the photo. This is an up close portrait at 50. And with this, I did crop in a little bit to create the final composition. There was much more headroom in the original photograph. And I know that I can't get too close with the 50 because it will distort. So what I did there was, I'm shooting with super high resolution cameras, the Sony A7R5. I think it's 60 something megapixels. So I stay a little bit back, and then in post I cropped in. So I cropped probably about 30% out of this frame. So sometimes you can do that if you have a focal length where, if I get too close, it's going to create weird distortion or an unflattering look. Well, I can just stay back, but knowing that I'm going to punch in later in post-production. Now kind of looking more at 24 to 70 and looking at that focal length and extending that out, stepping back a few feet, or even on the right, a few more feet, and capturing those. This one we saw the 24 to 70 in that close look. And again, this one has nothing really to do with the environment. It has everything to do with the ring. So I'm re-showing this photo just to remind us that even though, yes, this is more of an environmental portrait, but we're at the beach and the sun's setting, it's more of a mood kind of setter. Our dog Daisy's getting up. I don't know if she'll make noise in the background, but we'll see. But you can really focus in on specific things, or a moment later, yeah, okay, now I'll step back and I'll tell the story of them. And they were just so happy and so content. I think this was one of the photos they used for their little announcement or something with that. In the ring, you can still see the ring well. But this comes back to the 24 to 70, as I mentioned before, really, really versatile, probably the most useful lens that I use, allowing to capture small little details and still work at a nice close distance to your subject. As a side note, this is the front lit version of this, and then I just walked around behind her and then shot the other way. So kind of now it's more side or backlit, and we're seeing more of the structure. And there goes my dog Daisy in the background. I don't know if you can see her, but so this focal length, I could, if I had to have one lens for a shoot where I needed a variety of shots, it's my 24 to 70 because of its versatility and really go anywhere, do anything, and do it in a really special way. The 85, I would say, is my favorite lens. This focal length affords you the ability to have this deep, up close, interesting connection. And this lens is also versatile. It's not, I tend to like those up close kind of traditional portraits, but these are two young actors. I did a photo of him, and then I asked his partner to come into the shot. I love actually this one, how their hands are sort of connecting in arms, and just the natural kind of relaxed moment this was outside of the theater building where they were working. So, and then of course, these ones really up close. And this is actually a good kind of color study. You can see here in the image on the left, it's actually almost like two colors, the skin tone color, which is really muted in the eyes, and the one on the right has a little more yellow and green in it. And that green is then kind of reflecting off of his shirt, but also in his eyes. So it's a very limited color palette. I don't always go this far with removing color, but back to that conversation we were talking about earlier. And these images, again, 85, really giving us that, what is it? I don't know. It's like that, it's like a special, deep, even soulful, spiritual connection with the subjects. And doing so in a way, I think the subject, this is my opinion, but I think they feel still connected to you because you're not having to raise your voice. Like in the image on the right, I said, she was really nervous to be photographed. She said, I'm really not, not photogenic. I really don't want to do this. And I was like, okay, I get it. I don't like it either. And they said, well, tell me about your life, and told me about her husband or kids. And I said, okay, well, think of one of your kids and close your eyes, think about him. And then she did, and she kind of started to tear up, and just, there's a whole story there. But I love that I was able to have that natural conversation and then bring that feeling of her love for her son into the photo, which I don't think I could have done with the 70-200. All right, more 85s, more really just kind of walking around images. The one on the right in a parking garage, and I love parking garages because the way the camera sees is the shadow, inverse square law of light and all that. It just, the dark background becomes completely black. And so this then leads to this question of the perfect portrait gear. And what I want to do is show a couple more slides, but I also think we should pause here and talk about a few things. And one of those is, let me just stop sharing here. Let me see if I can do this. Stop share. Is that what you'll hear is you'll find people who will say, this is my favorite portrait lens, the 70-200, or I really like the 35 because I can, it's my favorite lens. And I guess what I'm getting at is the thing to keep in mind for me is the why. So if someone really loves the 35, they're telling me they like to do environmental portraiture. They're never going to be able to do those up close 85 portraits I do with that lens. You could get close, especially if you go horizontal, but you can never accomplish with an 85 what you can with a 35. And then with an 85, if you wanted that wide view, it's hard to step back. Sometimes I'm in too close of a space to get, like when I was shooting this chocolate factory and I was photographing one of the chocolate makers, I had to use the 35 because there's machinery behind me. And I could, if I had, maybe 20 feet behind me, I could have backpedaled a lot and probably gotten a similar kind of feel. But sometimes you just don't have that. And so part of it is what kind of images do you like? And then another part of it is just like logistics, like how much space do you have to work with as well. Derek, talk to me, man, my man. What's coming up? Any questions?
I love that you said the why. That's exactly what I was thinking, because we do always, and we even got a couple questions in on, lens relations, lens and focal lengths related to portraits, but it really, it's different goals. What is your goal? What is the vibe you're going for? What space do you have to work with, like you said? So Can
I jump to that before you ask a question? The other thing is, like, what kind of weight do you want to carry as well? So the 70-200, I love that lens, but it's a pretty big and heavy lens. So if, let's say, we're going to go do street portraits all day and you and I were hanging out in New York, so we got to do that someday. But I probably wouldn't bring my 70-200 out on the street. 85 still a big lens, but I would deal with that. Or if I wanted to be real nimble, the lens I have my eyes on is that new 50. That Sony put out, this new 50, which is really lightweight and amazing. So I would probably actually, if I own that lens, I would use that one. So it's like thinking about the why, also the weight, the space, the job, all these things. It's not just like, wow, this one is really reviewed well and is expensive, I'll buy it.
Totally. There's so many factors that go into it. And a lot of times I feel like, especially photographers who are either just starting out or aren't fully confident and comfortable in their own skill set.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll let the job or the person that they're taking photos of dictate the lens, where it's like,
Yes.
Oh, I want pictures like this. I get it all the time. I want pictures that look like this.
Yeah.
And I look at the pictures and in my head, I'm like, okay, well, what do you need them for?
Yeah.
What are you doing with them?
Yes.
I know a little bit about the person, obviously, usually. And a lot of times in my head, I'm like, well, no, this picture looks great because of they had a full set. They've had a full crew. I'm going to be taking photos of you in your apartment. We probably have an hour. We don't have the space. You want them for this. This was clearly an editorial for a magazine, but you need something like an actor's headshot. So it's going to be completely, it's our job as the professional to take all those factors that you're pointing out into consideration and say, no, this is the best tool for the job.
Yeah, and even adding to that, like even our own physicality. And what I mean by that, I talked a little bit about angle of view, you know, and I didn't talk how that relates to camera height. So when you have a 200, you're working at 200 millimeters, you can shoot high, low, whatever. It's all going to look good. By now, hopefully, we all kind of know these ideas of compression and how with those lenses, it's going to create this compressed, beautiful look. Like you could, doesn't matter. But if you have a wider angle lens and you have a knee and you're about to get knee surgery, probably shouldn't shoot with that because you're going to have to get down on your knees quite a bit. And I'm just thinking because I taught this workshop. And with wider angle lenses, your camera height really matters. So if I taking a portrait of someone standing up with a 35, I'm not at eye level. I'm getting a little bit lower. If it's a full length shot, I'm getting almost about their waist level to create a natural look. Now with my 85, we're standing at eye level. I might go a little below, I might go a little above, but my camera height isn't changing as much. So I guess I'm just sort of thinking through that as well as our own physicality and movement, that how we're going to move with our gear as well. And what I mean by that is I'm just thinking, let's say you said actor headshot in someone's apartment, and yeah, you could easily put, an 85 on sticks and a tripod and have a stool and kind of have it all dialed in and locked in. And it's, not a lot of moving, and let's say their apartment has all this expensive stuff you don't want to be backing into. I'm not going to have a 35, like kind of trying to find the angle in the shot, moving around. Or maybe, like I mentioned, maybe I have a bust knee or injured knee or something. Or back to the street photography thing, how much weight are we carrying in our backpack all day? Or if I'm doing a commercial shoot, how much gear is too much gear even, is an important question. So lightweight for me is really, really important. And so that's where even I mentioned that 24-70 G Master 2, it's so lightweight, it's so easy peasy, that I feel like it's versatile. So, and I'm saying that about myself. The important thing for anyone else is to say, well, what is it for me? Who cares what Chris thinks? He's just bringing up the topic. Now I need to figure out what I like, and how do I use that?
Definitely. Well, I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
dive
let's do
into
questions.
these
Yeah.
now or so.
Yeah.
Andrew's asking about lighting and backgrounds as well as using flash outside.
Yeah. I think, one thing that comes to mind is one of my mentors said is people use, backgrounds or backdrops as a cop out. When he first said that, I was like, what do you mean? He never would use them. I do use them, but let me just qualify what he said. He said, people will go to Paris and they'll just say, stand in front of the Eiffel Tower, and they're standing there and the Eiffel Tower is behind them like a backdrop, or whatever the thing is, or there's a cool wall, stand in front of it. And what they're not doing is connecting the person to the place, to the story, to the narrative. So I think when it comes to light or environmental portraits of any kind, it's really about creating a connection. Then when it's about working up close, it's about creating that connection as well, and trying to utilize a backdrop in a way that deepens that. Like there were those two I said were kind of like maybe one in a parking garage shot. I love that photo. So I'm using that all black, it's just a shadow, but it's really a background, to really simplify, and then the light, even light across that person to create this connected moment. And so for me, it's not so much, is it bad or good, but it's about connection. So the background in this case, I'm using as a way for me to connect to the subject. Does that make sense? I'm not just like,
Totally.
oh, it's like a black background, throw it up and the picture will be good. I see students do that, or like, oh, I'll bring out my lights on the street. And you're like, well, yeah, but maybe that much light that you added made it so obvious that they're light that it just looks kind of odd. Maybe if you feathered a little more or blended it in a little bit, and again, this is my own style, then it will look good. So you're not even really thinking about the light, or you're not thinking about, oh, they're in front of the Eiffel Tower. You're like, wow, they're integrated in. And maybe maybe this is a goofy analogy, Derek, but I'm thinking of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. People have been doing this for years where they like pretend to be holding it up or something, but that's like integrating the subject into the scene versus just like, here's our family and here's this thing. I mean, that's become kind of an Instagram corny thing, but I think the point is like exploring how do we use light and backdrops as a way to integrate and connect. And when portrait photographers do that, it becomes beautiful. I think where we go wrong is where we think that, I mean, I've heard some photographers say you want better pictures, stand in front of better things. I disagree with that. I think it's more about your intention and your attention to detail and how they're fitting into it versus just like, oh, throw up the backdrop, that cuts everything out. Now you stand there, now take the picture. It's, and now I have a great lens. It's still going to be heartless, soulless, lifeless, uninteresting, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
There's because emotion cuts way deeper and it's
Mhm.
drawn from a different source.
I love that. Man, you're so profound. Emotion cuts way deeper. It's drawn from a different source. I feel like I should be writing that down right now.
I probably stole that from you. I probably watched too many year
I
old.
feel like I should just let you remotely take over my computer and do the rest of the presentation.
This is you, because as soon as we get off, I'm gonna go back to like their.
No way. No.
All right, we had a question from Michael. Michael, you're speaking my language. Can you speak about the 35mm lens, when and how you use it, what types of subjects for portraits? Let's
Yeah.
talk 35mm.
I'll talk 35. I love when I'm filming, I feel like a 35 is more like a 50. What I mean by that, you have a different aspect ratio, so you're losing some of it. So it feels very natural, I guess is what I'm getting at. When I'm working and capturing stills and portrait, which is really our topic of today, it has this sense where, in my mind, it's a little bit hungry. And what I mean by that is the 85 is satiated. It's like you point at someone up close, like, this is great, Chris. You know, like we're good here. The 35 is like, oh man, I want to take in more and what's going on. And it's kind of searching, looking. And it's like, you know, it's kind of like your friend that comes over your house and is like, where are your tortilla chips? You know, and you're like, well, or can I have a snack? They go in your kitchen, they're rummaging for stuff, you know, you know, the 35 has that. And so what I have to do when I'm working with that lens is just know it's going to want to really take a lot in. And what I mean by that is in portraiture, like even this frame here, it's not a great frame, but it's, you know, it's probably, you know, maybe around here is like a 35 or something. What we do as a photographer, we're locking with the eyes of the subject, but the 35 is like all this other stuff too. It's hungry. It's like, what else is there? What's the rest of the story? Come on, people. Like, let's tell a bigger story than just, you know, zeroing in on the eyes. And so I use that when I have the sense that the place is very important character in the portrait, and that it's somehow essential. Like I would say, I'm just going to go to your setup here. It's not really essential. It's just kind of a nondescript. There's some pictures, there's a mic, can't really tell what it is or wasn't what it isn't. I think if I put a black backdrop behind you, or if we turned your lights out black, that would work equally as well as having the lights on. But in contrast, if you're a painter and you're in your studio, you know, if I have the 24 to 70, I'm going maybe 24 or 35, whatever. Or I'm putting on the 35, just knowing like, Chris, don't forget to tell the studio story, because if I have the 85 on, that lens can't tell that story. And so if that lens is on my camera too soon, I'm like backing up and there's just no way to show the whole studio. And then I leave the shoot and I'm like, oh, dang it. I forgot that other part of it. So long story short, it's an instinctual thing. Love that lens. It's all time. The quality is off the charts, amazing. The lack of distortion, meaning there's no bending, weird wonkiness. It's just like beautiful, clean, crisp, wonderful images. Whenever I'm sensing that the environment is key, that's go-to. And when I really want to lock into figuring that out, because the downfall of any kind of lens where it's a zoom like the 24 to 70 is I could be like 24, no, maybe zoom in 70, no, maybe 24. You know, you're kind of like indecisive. When you commit to a prime, you're really committing. You're like, okay, that's all I have. All right, let's see what the story is. How do I arrange myself? And it really requires you to move your camera height and move left to right. Look at lines, look at angles, look at what's in, look at what isn't in. Edges become really important in those pictures. If there's something, a hand cut off on an image or an elbow, we just need to be aware of that. So I would say, to that question, I'm imagining someone's maybe curious about using that more. I would say yes, go all in, and then just go in with those kind of things, that mindfulness. And that's when the lens becomes a success. When it's a failure is when I've seen students just say, oh, I heard 35 is great and it's kind of journalistic, and they're shooting everything, but their images look like nothing. And that can really happen with that lens. It can just be, and you're like, yeah, there's like a lot of studio, but there's also the vacuum cleaner and the cord, and they're like, oh, I didn't even see that. And you're like, yeah, and there's that bright window that's the brightest thing in the whole image, and then that's like, like even in my shot, this is so bright here photographically, that's not great, but it is what it is for Zoom. But that happens a ton when I'm working with students, reviewing portfolios, reviewing work. So it's a difficult focal length. Maybe that's what I'm getting at. Same thing with the 24-70. When you go wide, wide's hard. Wide is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. I mean, 7200, basically, you saw I could photograph someone in front of a dumpster and it's like a good photo, right? Maybe not at 1.4, maybe, or something. Maybe you go to 2.8 because that's almost too shallow. That would be working that close. But I'm digressing a little bit here. But if I had a 35 and I have a dumpster, whoo, good luck with that one. Like, how are you going to do the dumpster shot with your 35? Okay, I have to get really, really creative. And when you see people do that and pull it off, it's mind blowing. I mean, it's like, that's really good. But you just have to know you're going to have to work. The lens isn't going to give you anything. Yeah.
Wow.
Do you agree?
Artfully said. I do agree. And I think that we always have to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even when, for me, using an 85. So say I'm using an 85 1.2 or 1.4,
Yeah.
where it's like you just have that razor thin
Yes.
the field. It's very easy for that shot to turn boring. It's easy to look at images where somebody has a look and everything's just right and you processed it perfectly. There's a lot of people out there who don't have their processing down. They don't have a style. And thinking that, okay, I can just throw in a really shallow depth of field and cancel everything out. There's so many things that can still go astray, even out of focus shapes. So mine aren't, there's not a super shallow depth of field. I'm at f2.8 right now. I'm probably in the range of like 40 to 50 millimeters, I would say. There's still, it's the stuff in the background is out of focus, but I don't have enough separation. It's a smaller space, so I don't have enough separation.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, it might be less distracting to see more of these shapes, being that they're coming out of my head from all different angles. That might be less distracting than if it was completely out of focus and I just have these random blobs that are drawing my eye, and all I can focus on is what is behind him, what's he in front of, what's the scenario. So sometimes we get more caught up in what's out of focus than what's in focus.
True.
And it can be distracting. So it's like we have to pay extra attention even when everything is completely out of focus. And a lot of times people, it's like you said, you see an f1.4, when you saw your wife, it's like you focus on just that. And sometimes we narrow in only on what's in focus and we take everything else out of the equation. And then you wonder why are these images flat? Or why are we, going back to the emotion and feeling something? Why are we not feeling something? And I think for me personally, staying on this 35 millimeter conversation, what makes 35 millimeter, anywhere from 35 to 50, such an interesting and not only challenging, but rewarding focal length or focal range is because everything's there. From the gate, okay, everything's going to be, most of what I have is going to be in the shot. We're going to be able to tell what it is, and I have to work with it. So now what are you doing is, instead of focusing on one piece and then the curtain goes up and you're like, oh no, we forgot to move the bucket out of here, and now it's just this random out of focus shape back here. You're conscious of it. You're cognizant that, okay, I have this over here. How do we work this in? How do we work the scene? It's like that Annie Leibovitz approach of showing the background stand and showing the top of the seamless roll and the ceiling behind it. And there's random stuff. And there's a boom arm off to the side randomly over here. And it's like, okay, now I get it. I get the look that, it was going for. It's this kind of like deconstructed BTS look, and it works, rather than like you had said, there's something out there, and is that supposed to be there? Did they forget, or do they think they're more zoomed in?
Mhm.
Or so it's an interesting conversation to have. And being that we're on focal lengths now, we did have a question come in from Raphael asking, what about mid telephoto lenses, for example, 100 millimeter and the 135? Too long, he asks.
Yeah, I mean, I have 135, and maybe I'll answer that in 1 second, Raphael. Great question. The other thing I would just highlight, I think what you said is so spot on. And the other thing is a mismatch with the emotion. So we see really shallow depth of field for things that we are very interested in, we love, or we're really scared of. So if a tiger was jumping out, walking through, or I remember we were in Yosemite and a mountain lion like walked right by us and we all like saw it at f1.0. You're like so shallow, like you don't like, you know, you don't see anything but that. So whenever we have heightened emotion, we see shallow, and you can try this. Everyone can try this, and you'll see your depth of field does actually change. So what can happen though is you can have like a lot of emotion and then have someone without emotion, and there's like this mismatch. What comes to mind, kind of a bad example, but maybe decent. I have 3 daughters. My youngest daughter is looking for a dress for 6th grade graduation. If she like tries on a dress, it's just like beautiful, and she's this little kid. She's this bright, fun, vibrant kid, but she's just like, it's like, it's a mismatch. Like she's all dressed up, but her emotional thing. But if she comes out with the same dress and she's just like, oh my gosh, suddenly like her feeling and the dress are aligning, right? And so I think what I'm getting at is like sometimes people just think the shallow depth of field will create emotion. It doesn't.
Great
It's
point.
almost worse. Like I have to be so connected with my subject. I have to do so much work to make that connection because I shoot so shallow. Otherwise, it just falls flat and it fails. And so kind of remembering that, but if it's more like an environmental portrait and someone's walking through a shadow or at a distance, they could be mad, upset, angry, happy. It doesn't really matter because it's more about the whole environment's telling the story and they're kind of blending in with that. And we're kind of getting the vibe there. So it's more of a vibe. So, and then to Raphael's question about those other ones, 100 or 135, this is another one I have. All those are amazing. I love those. What's kind of funny is I find that even though I love those, like I have, I think it's a 135 GM 2.0 lens, I just don't use it very much. And I feel kind of bad about that because it's like an amazing lens. But I just find my working distance is a little bit too far away. And what that means is I'm just like 85, I'm 2 arms lengths away. So the person can put their arm out, I could put my arm out, our fingers could touch. That's a real conversational distance. If I go 3 arms lengths away or 4, which is kind of what you have to do with it when you get to those focal lengths, then I lose that connection. Now, some people, like, let me just think of my friend, Miguel, Sony Artisan as well. He loves that focal length, and he's more in a studio, and having that working distance is actually really more comfortable in the studio to be not quite so close to your subjects. My work, though, is more I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm out in the world. And so that's how I've come to enjoy those other focal lengths. So for Raphael, the question would be is what distance you like to work at, and kind of like, and what kind of images do you want to create? I think when you get to those longer lenses, you get a little more edge, a little more spice, a little more wow. And what I've found, I mean, let's go to spice. Let's go to spice and like, we're making, Derek, you're coming over for tacos. How spicy do we want these? Really mild, medium, or just off the charts? I'm kind of a medium spice kind of guy in my photography. I don't want it to be like, wow. I want it to be more like, wow, oh, like I want it to be a little contemplative, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So again, for me, the focal length choice comes in there. Now, that being said, maybe I need to change that for the next 2 months, shoot with longer lenses. And that would be a great exercise for me to learn better how to work at distances and whatever. So this isn't right or wrong. This is all about subject, personal preference. but being mindful that each lens is different. And back to the playing all 88 keys on the keyboard, if you're playing higher notes on the keyboard, it's different than if you're playing lower notes on the keyboard. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And so it's what some people try to do is they try to play like a dark, moody song and they're playing all these high notes, and it's like, well, it's just not happening. You need to shift it up there and then find the one that's the right match.
Totally. And when you come out to New York, it's all 35 to 50. You
Yeah,
have a choice.
yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
environmental.
Yeah, you need that space. You need that working distance, right? In that space. And
Yeah.
it sounds dreamy to me. Perfect.
Can't wait to see it. Now, we had a great question come in from Harry asking, how much of your creativity do you share with the client before and during the shoot?
Yeah. So how much of creativity, or maybe the process, maybe is what the question is. I share a lot with the client, and I see it as a chance to, because most of the people I photograph don't like being photographed, so they're not like models, just like, okay, let's go, and they're just giving their moves and everything. And so, like, let's say when I'm photographing the people in the chocolate factory, some of the workers there, I might say, this is the shot, and I would love to go back a little bit so I'm going to step away from you because I want to show you. And there's this thing called the chocolate escalator. I'm not kidding. The chocolates would be dumped into these big bins, and this escalator would lift them up, like 30 feet high, and then eventually go down into the packaging. It was awesome. But so I was like, well, I want to show the escalator with you. And so if you stand right here, and then I'll go back over there, what that will allow us to do is have this fun portrait of you with this cool thing. And they're like, oh, great. I think if I hadn't had said that, just say, stand there and then walked away, they would be like, what are you doing? And maybe I'm going to equivalent. I was on, our car was in an accident. So I called the auto body shop this morning to set up an appointment for it. And it wasn't our fault. Good. But I asked the person, I said, hey, yeah, I would love to have, this appointment on, he said, what day? I said, Wednesday. And then he just didn't say anything for like 30 seconds. And I was like, are you still there? He's like, oh yeah, I'm looking it up. But what a good customer service person does is I say, I would like it on Wednesday. He says, okay, great. My computer is lagging right now. Hang on a second. Let me look it up. And then I would have been like, fine. So you just have to like tell people what's happening. What's that?
Communication.
It creates safety. It creates predictability and trust,
yeah.
and collaboration. And so yes, I'm often telling them, or I say, let's do one where you're kind of aiming your feet and your shoulders away from the window, because this will kind of be like a cool dark moody thing. Or now let's aim towards the window, because this will have like a softer, more kind of natural vibe to it. And so versus just turn your head this way, stand that way. So yeah, I really do communicate a lot. That being said, some people don't really care. Some people, yeah, are like, let's just do this and get it over with. So then I modulate to that kind of communication. Other people are really interested. Like one person I was photographing again in the chocolate factory, just because it's on my mind. It's like, oh, what camera do you have? What lens? And I was using the 24-70. He's like, oh man, 24-70. He's like, my favorite's the 35. I'm like, well, I have that. He's like, yeah, dude, go get it. So I went and got it. And then we were nerding out on photography. And he's the guy who works the forklift in the factory, loves photography. I mean, who knew? So again, for him, then we got camera nerd, we were talking about all this stuff, but I'm connecting, I'm telling him my creative process. He's then like, well, what about this? Or maybe I should come into the scene this way. We're collaborating. So if he would have just said, yeah, great, I'll do a shot, and I do it, then I'm like, okay, cool. You look there. How about doing one where you just tilt your chin up a little bit so there's more light on your face? Great, done. See you, man. So it's really thinking about the subject and what their interest or need is based on how much you tell. Or if it's a CEO, like I photographed the CEO of Ghirardelli as well. I was anticipating he was just wanting to get this over with. He wanted to tell stories. And so in this case, it was like, okay, this is going to be storytelling moment. We're going to let him go. He's from Ireland. He was telling all these stories and all this stuff. So again, back to that person's question, is really reading the subject is key, and being open to do either method and not impose what you think is right just because you think it's right, but really the subject they will tell you verbally, non-verbally, what they need to know. And just like you said, Derek, you distilled it, communication. That's a big part of portraiture.
Totally. I mean, that's the most primitive tool that we all have in our camera bag, is just communicating.
Yeah.
They're understanding that they might not understand the technical terms. If you say, hey, well, if I use a longer lens, I'm going to get more compression.
Yeah,
Okay,
they have no.
what does that mean?
That sounds bad. Like, I think to
Yeah.
most people that sounds bad. And you know what most photographers do? I'd sadly I don't have a camera in front of me, but we'll just have an invisible camera. Because my workshop, I had this workshop, and most of them, what they'll do is they take the picture and then they look at the image with such furrowed brows and something. Basically, what went wrong is their focus, their settings, and the subject just feels like they did something bad. So number one communication is when you do this and your light didn't fire, or you get a black frame, whatever, you just say like, oh great, this is so good. Like, oh my gosh, my settings are wrong. Hang on a second, I gotta fix this. You're doing great. I just messed up. Here we go, versus, oh, that. And again, that is the most primitive, important, essential thing in this portraiture. And even using terms like you said, compression, I don't think to other people that sounds good, like what, like compression, like I'm being squished, or like, what is
Yeah.
that? They don't have any association. Like for us, compression is amazing. We've watched maybe videos on wide angle lenses is distorted, and those other ones are compressed, but finding ways to translate that, which is like this lens and this light, see how big this light is? I know it's weird, but it's so big, it's so soft, and it is just beyond flattering. And they will say, good, because I need as much help as I can get with this. So bring it on, Chris. They don't need to know it's an octabank. They don't care what that
Definitely.
word means. They don't need to know it's a shoot through umbrella or whatever, or an 85. They don't care. That means zero to them.
Definitely. Well, our last question here comes back to the settings.
Yeah.
Joanne's asking what kind of settings for low light situations. She was doing an event the other weekend. It was hard to get the balance of freezing the motion without the ISO going too high and ruining the shot with nose. What nose?
Noise.
That's me. I ruin the shot with I
Yeah.
get the worst nose for photos. Ruining with noise. She was using a 17 to 35 f2.8. So low light, noise. You got to get portraits.
Yeah, I think, well, first let's go to the nose comment. There's one photographer I know who's been shooting his whole life, and his nose actually goes this way, because when you take pictures, you push it, and a whole life of doing that, you get a crooked nose. So I hope that when I'm older, my nose is a little crooked. It's not there yet, but I'm, every time I smash but think about it. When you hold your camera up, you're going to notice every time but to the noise question, that's a great question. And what it comes down to, I think, is testing it beforehand. And so what I mean by that, or now that you've had a low light situation, is just, let's say at night tonight, turn lights off or whatever it is, or it's candlelight or it's one light or lamp light, and just figuring out what is usable for your camera and lens combo. And all cameras have different light sensitivity. Obviously I shoot Sony, but Sony has some cameras that are really good in low light, some that aren't as good as that, or whatever, or it depends on what version of the camera you have. So it's almost impossible to answer generally, except specifically what I do is, in my mind, it's called flipping the sailboat. So when you take a sailing class here in Santa Barbara Harbor, 14.5-foot boat, at some point they say, flip your boat. So you're on edge, and then it flips. So you got to find that edge in order to learn how to sail well. If you never know, you're always like, am I too far? Am I not far enough? And this is with smaller sailboats. But I think photography is a smaller sport, so to speak. So we have to find like, oh, that noise just becomes so unusable. I can't go there. I need to bring in external lights or a flash or just something, or that is usable. And then also I would need to explore some noise reduction software. There's a lot of amazing tools out there. Like if I did a lot of event photography and a lot of stuff in low light, I would either invest maybe first in software because it's more affordable, then second in a camera, or then, I don't know what order, camera and lens, because the difference between 2.8 and 1.4, oh my gosh, you would be really surprised. It costs more money, but it really affords the ability to shoot in low light with cleaner images. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but testing, software, and then gear. I think that can be a good combo.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then maybe jump back to slides for just a second, Derek, to show
Yes,
my
yes,
last, just a
definitely.
couple little slides here, I think,
Home.
just to kind of wrap us up, which is the perfect portrait gear. If I had to say for me, it's in this case the R5, and then that 24 to 70 and the 85. So those are the ones that really, the combo I use most frequently. And again, we all need to come up with our own combo. If any of this resonates and you want more on the connecting side, that book's, there's content there. And then there's my contact info if you have follow-up questions or anything. I love talking about this. Last but not least, I'm well aware this was not let me just see, let me just make sure I'm still here. This is not a super technical gear review video, but I wanted to do that intentionally. I think because there's a lot out there on, you could go to the DxO and look at the rating of the lenses, that like the 85 I'm talking about is incredibly highly rated. The 24 is incredibly highly rated, and almost like it's boring. The G Master lenses are so good. There's really nothing you can say negatively about them. So I didn't want this just to be a parade of like, wow, this is good, this is good, this is good. But I wanted it to be more of a thoughtful conversation of, okay, well, what focal length, regardless of the brand, and then also what kind of imagery can we make, and what are some of the ways we can do this with these focal lengths or f-stops. And so I hope it's helpful. And if you have other specific technical questions, we can always go there, send me a DM or something too. And Derek, this has been awesome, man.
I love
Thanks for
that.
hosting.
Nah, thank you for coming on as always, man. And I love that you did it that way, because my 2 cents is that there's so much more to the emotion of a portrait than gear and settings. It's one of those areas where, yeah, we have to talk about it. It's important, but it's not important, but it is important. And it's
Yes.
one of those, like, if you know, it's like, yes,
Yeah.
it's important, but it's not. And it's really all about, it's subjective. It's like this the past hour, right? Everything's been situational. It's been,
Yeah.
well, okay, a hammer might be the right tool to tap a nail in, but where are you tapping a nail in? What material?
Yes.
What
Yes.
kind of housing? Is it 11 p.m. and you live in an apartment building and the wall is adjoining to someone else's apartment? There's so many factors that go in to portraiture. I know photographers that, they focus on shutter speed and only shutter speed because they don't want a single bit of motion blur.
Yeah.
And I know there's very accomplished photographers that focus manually. Mark DePaula, perfect example. Mark DePaula is a fashion photographer, shoots for a lot of top fashion brands, and he manually focuses at the beginning. He gets his manual focus very shallow depth of field, wide open, and just rips. And the model moves, and he moves, and the shots are blurry, and some stuff is in focus, some stuff is out of focus. But it's about emotion. Motion creates emotion, and he really sets everything to where he just gets in the zone. The light is the way he needs it. The camera is set exactly how he needs it. And he knows that that's his style. The creative director, whoever he's working with, knows that that's his style. So I think it's like you've kind of driven home, Chris, that there's so many other factors. And I think it's best summed up by what you say. We all need our why. Our why tells us exactly which direction to go. And, the what, the why, who it's for, you put all those factors in, and you start to piece together the answers to your puzzle of, what gear do I need to use? That's the easiest part. The gear is black and white. It comes down to physics and technicalities, and this can do this, and it does this. This is what it does well. This, if you zoom in, this is what it's going to do. We are the ones that hold the paintbrush, and we decide that, are we going to use the tool the way it's intended, or are we going to take the tool and use it in a different way in order to get a different result? And I think everybody should be out there striving to push the boundaries of what they do. And if you take all of your photos and all of your portraits with an 85 or a 135, go wide. It's no different than anything else, learning to do anything else. You're really just learning to do something different. It's still photography, yes, but you're learning to see in a different way. And it might not be successful. And it might not be successful the first 100 times you do it, but then you're going to have that one shot where you're like, wow, this this is really cool. This is outside the box. So it's great to have people like you on to continually inspire and point out different ways to see different things so that it's not just all one size fits all, because photography is dependent upon the person, upon the relationship between the subject and the photographer, and all the different factors that we have at play. So Chris, always great having you on. You always open up the mind.
Yeah, and one more thought too with that.
Go for
I
it.
know we're still going, but is the relationship between you and the subject is important, and then also the relationship between you and your gear is a lot of what we're talking about. And one of the topics that we haven't mentioned yet is price. And I think learning how to just embrace where we all are at. Like obviously I'm showing really high end gear, but I've been doing this a long time, and I've bought and gotten my gear over the last decade, piece by piece. So if you can't get the latest and greatest, that's okay, and just love what you have and say like, okay, well, this isn't f2.8, this is f4. Okay, fine. I'm gonna tell that story and work with that this affords me and allows me to do. But then when you have those hunches that I would like to go more in a direction, like what I found with lenses, because really that's the bulk of what this is about, is like one good lens is better than like three mediocre lenses. And so as you start to realize, okay, this is more my focal length, that's kind of why I wanted to distill it. Like if I were new to photography and if I could afford it, I would get one of those last two lenses that I highlighted, or maybe, the 50, I think it's the 50 1.8 is pretty affordable, or the 85 1.8. I have that lens too. I love that lens. I use that for travel. So there's great advantage to using, more affordable lenses. Cost is up there, but quality is great as well. So I just kind of want to throw that out there because I realized, yeah, it's a little bit, I get that some of this gear may be out of range for people. And if that is the case, don't let that get you down. Start with what you have. That's what we've all done. That's what you do, Derek. That's what I do. I still would do that if that's what I had available to me. And then as you move along, though, just pay attention to your instinct and gut, not the marketing. The marketing's kind of wrong because it's general. You're like, this is a great new lens. It's like, well, is it a great new lens for you? For what you want to accomplish, the way you want to work, the way you want to focus, to your point. Do you really want to go for manual focus? Well, then maybe the new autofocus feature isn't that important. Or if you're like me and you're getting a little older and your eyes aren't as sharp as they once were, maybe you need the help of the autofocus. So if it says this new autofocus is great, for me, I'm like, yes, I'm going to use that. I'll take all the help I can get there.
Same.
But trust that and know that great images can be made with really any type of gear, as long as we're connected to our why. We have that. We're bringing that into it. So epic to talk, Derek. So fun. I could talk all day.
Well, look, luckily we don't have to wait too long because you're back Monday, and
yes,
Monday's a conversation. So for those of you who really just want to hear Chris and I riff and vibe, clearly whenever we get going, there's no shortage of great topics, great discussion. You guys are invited along for the ride. It's going to be Monday, the 27th of March at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So 6 days from now, Chris is going to be back, and we're just going to be talking shop. I mean, really just talking about anything photography related. If there's anything you guys want us to bring up and want to hear Chris riff on anything, of course, you guys are invited. Feel free to throw any of those topics at us.
Yeah, and I think part of that, just to prime that too, is if there's like, we have both been doing this a little while, we've made so many mistakes, and we're pretty open and vulnerable and honest about that. Ultimately, I think both of us with our teaching, we want to help you avoid those.
Yes.
Learn through us. Yes. So and dig deeper and explore not only what photography used to be, but what it is today and what it's becoming, because we're in this pretty big changing moment, and we all need to buckle up and really, really dig into what this is and what this is becoming in order to take advantage of it, in order to grow with it. And I think there's so many examples throughout the history of photography where new things hit and then people get left behind in the dust, and that's happening now. And so part of our conversation is about that, and what is the relevance and how do we do all these things. So yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be a good one.
I love it. It is going to be awesome. Always great talking with you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you, of course, for taking the time out of your day to join us. Sony for hosting today's event, and all of our viewers out there for listening, watching, getting your questions in. We see you all back here with Chris, as I said, next Monday, the 27th, 3 p.m. Eastern time. But that's all we got. More Orwig coming next week.
Right.
Another rendition of VNH virtual event space is in the books. Catch y'all next time.